Monsieur Affichard. My first question is about your title. Talk about it. Are you seeing your system as a tribe?
So tribology is actually the science of friction. So it's basically like a study that like tests different kind of material and to like put two elements in friction, and actually by this science you create material that are able to work or to be sustainable or to also do certain kinds of things. For example, the rubber of our shoes, the tires, so many different sectors, and like it's under this umbrella of tribology, which means science of friction. And I thought
it means science of friction, not tribe like in people.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Alternative was also, in a way, another proposition to first take the friction as a vibratory phenomenon and also something that can make sounds, and also here kind of examine different ways of how this friction can happen. And actually you have a wind instrument, so you have fluid frictions, you have vibratory elements and vibration with these little motors, and you have the heat elements that are also another kind of friction that happen inside the tube and produce sound. And so my idea for this installation was actually to try to see how those different phenomena can actually meet and have certain point of friction themselves between each other in a composition.
I think you said to me that you studied art and you were interested in perhaps different materialities, and your interest in sound came later.
I think for me it changed a lot in 2018 when I did a postmaster in Stockholm that was called the Composition Public Space, CPS, and it was directed by artist Tarek Atoui, who works also in this realm, and with him and a lot of different people I met on the way, I discovered a whole world of like experimental instrument, and I completely fell in love with experimental music. And I then, in order to get into that process, I like building my own instrument became some kind of like evidence, and I wanted to continue. And this is what I've been doing since 2018, and so everything that you see here is like one instrument or different research on different things over the course of 4 years, and that I completed during residencies or during research at my atelier. And here today is really the first time that I combine all of this together in an installation that is also running autonomously and create a composition for it.
So you mentioned the architecture of materials as an instrument, system of instruments, and you have obviously connections through the energies of the air and electricity, or you have the so-called transductors. Can you say a word about what transduction is?
Yeah, transduction is actually basically going through the material. It's like from the Latin transductio, and it's basically the transductor, and they need a contact to it's little speakers that need to be in contact with an object to resonate. Otherwise, we will hear them, but they will not be used at their full capacity. So when you have, for example, a normal speaker has a cone and it's moving through the air, and this is why we hear the sound. And here in the opposite, you need a surface to put these transducers on top of it to be able to resonate, and you make, by definition, resonate the whole object onto which it's placed.
A small question on the side, because I remember growing up learning to play harmonium and pipe organ, and the harmonium had foot pedals.
Yeah.
How do you get the air into the pipe? Or into the organ pipe?
Into the organ pipe. So there is a small computer fan inside this box, and then I built a box, and then I can control it and its velocity, its voltage. And there on the pipe, then you have like two kinds of instruments. So you have, first of all, you have a control that is the voltage control, that control the power of how much air you send. Here you have also a tap, you can control and turn, and you can control how much you want to send air inside the flute. Then here you have a chamber of air, which is basically also how organ pipe works. And I added 3 reeds of harmonium inside that can that are in resonance with the frequency of this flute. And this one you can also move the bevel here, that will also change the note. So you have many possibilities to play with it in a performance. So all of this instrument I actually played a lot in performances before, and then by doing that, I learned techniques of experimental music, how to do different kind of sound with them, and this is also how I reached the point of an installation, after all of these years of performing.
I mean, the materials and the objects, like the percussion objects or the glass or the container for the water, the metal, is fascinating. And so in terms of the sonic characters, do the different materials make you think of different sounds, or do you generate through the material the sound, or do you process it in software?
It actually works with relay, so it's just triggering on and off. And to make it a little bit more interesting in the composition, I compose with uneven numbers. So they are closed loop, that they are kind of like evolving together and synchronizing themselves, and sometimes desynchronizing themselves. And throughout this, I did a composition that is roughly about 10 minutes. And then on top of that, by listening to where there was no sound or nothing happening physically with this instrument, I compose a soundtrack that goes on top of it and like complete, so to say, the composition, which is it is 20 minutes. So in total, the whole piece is 20 minutes.
A small question came to me when I remembered having seen something in the past with objects bouncing on vibrational surface. Cymatics, I think it was called. And I see you have the drumstick on the drum, and here you have tiny little pebbles. Were you interested in this bouncing behavior?
Yeah, I think I mean what's interesting is like all of these like little vibrators or motors, and they are super efficient and powerful, and they also you can actually attach them to objects or make rings certain objects. And I feel like this is also something that I learned from other experimental musicians who are using a lot of things in sets, usually like on drums and stuff like this, to create sound. And so I wanted also to kind of like see what was possible. And I think also for the drum over there, the rattling sound is also what's interesting is like somehow it's going to have some uncertainties of like how it's going to behave because of like some object put on the latex, for example, and they're gonna move in a certain way. But you can, what I like and what I try to do is to try to find these moments of almost unbalanced and almost instabilities, and like play with those, you know. So that's also like when you reach a point, it's almost falling or almost doing something that you could not do with your hand, but it's so perfectly put in at this place that if you move an object by 2 centimeters, it's going to do something else. So that's what I like about it. It means also that next time I'm going to show this exhibition, it's not necessarily going to be exactly the same sounds, even though I will try to repeat, and each time is different according to the space, to the echo of the space as well, and how people can hear it.
Maybe, if you don't mind, I was particularly interested also in when you demonstrated the heat along with the air. You said, you know, when is this called an electrode or?
No, this is actually a coil of resistive wire.
A coil.
Exactly. So it's like this wire that you usually have in toasters.
Yeah.
And so when you put electricity to it, it glows orange and it produces a lot of heat. And this is actually a version of the so-called flame organ. So it's someone from the 19th century in Strasbourg who invented this organ, who was working with gas and flame inside tubes. And it was scaled to like, I don't know, 20, 30 tubes of glass. And that was making like an organ, and he had a keyboard and was playing like an organ. And in this version, I wanted to go a bit further and not think in terms of gas, but think in terms of electricity, because once again, I can also control it with relay. And also, I wanted to have the possibility to, so I could move these pieces, because basically what's happening, it's a resonance that takes the frequency of the length of this tube. And in order to have like an organ and to do microtonality, for example, I could change the pitch. And I can also, during live performance, I can also reduce the voltage and then control also the amplitude of the sound.
Beautiful. And it's also as an architecture, as an object, it's very, very rich, I think, in glass. And what kind of metal is this?
This is brass.
Brass. Beautiful. And something you might want to say about the water?
Of course, yeah. The water, well, it's very simple actually. Like it is just a pump that is pumping the water down and like putting it back in drops and create some sound, and it is picked up by this hydrophone. And what's happening more is actually I have once again this little transducer here that are the speakers we were talking about, and these ones, I put it on the stone, and so the sound that you hear to the speaker is actually going through the stone and through the water and picked up by this hydrophone.
I see.
And so everything that you hear through the speakers actually are, let's say, are passing through the matter. So they are passing here, they are being naturally filtered or compressed. The same here over there, it passed through the tile and through the drum head, and so what you hear is actually once again this idea of friction and like going through the material and being filtered in a natural way.
Thank you, Alan. My last question, I hope it's okay.
Of course.
I watched you on Friday, opening night performance, and do you think, in terms of your experience, the audience can follow these perhaps somewhat complicated physical or electroacoustic procedures, or do you trust the sound to be standing on its own?
I think, I mean, a lot of people usually ask like very practically questions.
Technical questions.
Exactly. How does it work, etc. But I think like it's important also to share this knowledge to everyone. But you don't need necessarily to understand everything to just receive the piece in a way. And I think I try my best to actually to make it also a bit didactic, that people can see objects moving and move around and perceive sound differently.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense, because in some moments of sound art or electronic art, I remember artists saying, the acousmatic people, I don't want people to look, just listen, But your work is very rich in terms of its visual stimuli, right? And we need to see this turning.
Yeah.
What are your future hopes or plans?
I guess I would like to continue on this idea. This is the first try for this installation, but the idea is that for me, I would like to build different also installation similar or that can complete, because I consider, for example, this space here, this metal structure, as one cluster that is feeding these, and I could imagine later having other structures with other instruments, and how can those two pieces can once again enter in frictions together and compose or decompose also separately, but how they can actually find points of friction again, And so the idea is that the tool itself, because what we call the tool is a tribometer, which calculates the tribology and the essays, which is basically a rotating plate with an object on it and like a pin down object that's going to be for hours, turn around, and this is how it calculates how fragile or lubricated it needs to be for certain technology. And I feel like doing this installation and this tribometer entering themselves in tribology would be super interesting conceptually, and let's see how it's gonna happen, but it's gonna take some time.